Oren liked silence, not the kind that buzzed in your ears and made your thoughts too loud. He liked the kind you could only find on a terraformed moon at night, when even the moss stopped whispering, when the atmosphere regulators purred softly, and nothing demanded fixing. His job was simple: inspect the water collectors, patch the dome seams, recalibrate the wind filters when the gravity shifted slightly, and made everything feel like swimming through syrup. He wore a dusty yellow suit, patched 3 times, and lived alone in Dome 3. So when a shuttle arrived with its smooth metallic belly and flashing lights, Oren frowned. He checked his schedule twice. No visitors, no deliveries. Yet out she stepped. She was not human. She was not pretending to be either. Her skin shimmered like soap bubble film, opalescent and almost translucent. Her arms were long and winged, feathers curling down in spirals. Her eyes, too wide for a human face, blinked slowly, absorbing everything. She introduced herself in soft, chirp tones. He didn't catch the name the first time. "I'm Ciari," she repeated, adjusting a pack strapped across her narrow shoulders. "I'm here for the moss." Oren blinked. "The moss, it sings," she said, as if this was a reasonable explanation. He looked at the green carpeting under their feet, creeping up the walls, pulsing gently with the cycles of the moon's artificial light. It had grown faster than predicted, overtaking the observation domes within months. Most researchers thought it was just eager biology adapting well. "It hums in frequencies I've only heard in ancient species," she said, kneeling and placing her winged hand against the floor. Oren scratched his stubble. "Well, just don't touch the stone." She tilted her head. "What stone?" He pointed to the large, egg-shaped rock near the far wall. It looked out of place among the green, smooth, and dark like obsidian. "We found it when we laid the foundations. Nobody knows what it is, but the last person who poked it started hearing whispers." She smiled, a shimmer running down her cheeks. "Maybe the stone has a song too." "I'm serious," Oren said. Frowning, she nodded solemnly. "I won't touch it." By the third night, Ciari had set up strange instruments all over Dome 5. Rods that buzzed softly, dishes that reflected moonlight into the moss, and strings that vibrated without wind. Oren watched from a respectful distance. He tried not to care, but he found himself watching how she moved, how she tilted her head. When listening, how she spoke to the moss like it could answer. "You hear that?" she asked him once. He leaned closer. "No, it's a harmony," she said, low and slow, like a cradle song. "Not meant for us, but felt by us, still. Just moss to me," he said, but he felt something tighten in his chest. Something wistful. The trouble began on the 5th day. Oren was replacing a faulty moisture trap when the entire dome trembled. Not an earthquake, not exactly. More like a vibration that made the inside of his skull hum. He clutched the rail and heard the moss whisper his name. He sprinted to Dome 5. Ciari stood in the center, breathless, both hands pressed to the singing stone. "I told you not to touch it," he shouted. "It called me," she whispered, eyes wide. "It needed me." He looked around. The moss had grown taller. Vines curled along the walls, pulsating. Flowers had bloomed where none had existed before, bioluminescent and eerily beautiful. And the stone was glowing. "The moon is awake," Ciari said. Oren dragged her away from the stone. "We need to report this." "No," she said. "It's not angry, it's happy. It called me mother." Oren stared at her. "What?" "Twice now. Once when I touched it. Once just now," it said. "Mother returned. It's malfunctioning. It's not a machine," she said, softly. "It's something old. Something planted here long before we arrived." The moon changed overnight. The moss grew thicker. It began forming spirals around Ciari's camp. Flowers opened toward her as she passed. Systems across the station began flickering. Energy rerouted itself toward Dome 5. Oren tried to file an alert. The console refused. It printed a message instead. "Mother has returned. Do not fear." He showed it to Ciari. She read it and smiled. "It loves. Moons can't love. This one can." By the 7th day, the stone pulsed in time with Ciari's heartbeat. She could sense it now, even across domes. Do you know what it wants? Oren asked her. During one of their quiet dinners in Dome 3, she nodded. To grow. To remember, it was once a seed for a consciousness experiment. They left it here and forgot. But it waited, and you? I matched the genetic pattern of its original caretaker. Or close enough. It mistook me. Or chose me. I'm not sure. Oren stirred his soup. It's dangerous. It's lonely, she corrected. He looked at her then, really looked. She was not so strange anymore, not so alien. Her skin still shimmered. But now he saw the tired lines at her eyes, the way her shoulders hunched when she thought no one noticed. I know what loneliness feels like, he said. She smiled at him. You understand it better than most. He reached for her hand. She let him hold it. That night, the moon bloomed. Oren woke to find vines wrapped around Dome 3, flowers stretching toward the sky. Light poured from the moss like golden dew, and the stone had grown into a spire. Cri stood at its base, barefoot, singing. Oren ran to her. What are you doing? The moon asked for a song, she said. So I gave it one. We have to stop this. Why? He couldn't answer. He just knew it felt like something slipping away. Something not theirs to hold. But the moon didn't stop. The moss reached the outer domes. Systems across the lunar base rerouted to support the growth. Energy drawn from storage batteries surged into the soil. Then a voice spoke over the intercom. Not mechanical, not male or female. It was soft. I remember you. Mother. Cri collapsed. Oren carried her to the medbay, hands trembling. The monitors flickered as he scanned her. She wasn't injured, just exhausted. It's inside her mind. He whispered, it's talking to her. When she woke, her eyes glowed faintly. It's not angry, she whispered. It was just sleeping, dreaming of being needed again. Oren looked at her, aching. What happens now? She smiled faintly. It wants to make this place a garden, and you? She hesitated. I don't know. It doesn't want to. Let go. He reached for her hand again. Then we reminded how to share. The next days were strange and beautiful. The moon built structures of stone and vine, shaped by Cri's memories, bridges like feathers, towers that hummed. Oren stayed by her side. They walked under glowing trees that hadn't existed the week before. And though the moon still whispered mother, it began calling Oren something else. Friend. As if it, too, was learning. As if love could bloom from stone, moss, and the warmth of unexpected hands. Vayan had always heard music in silence, not melodies exactly, but tones, dissonant hums in the corners of rooms, subtle drones and electronics that others swore were silent. Some called it a gift, others called it a defect. She never corrected them, she just listened. So when the moon began to sing, Vayan was the first to hear it. It started as a low tremble beneath the observatory, a bass-pitched murmur that fluttered in her stomach and made her ears throb. No one else noticed it at first. They blamed faulty pressure seals, equipment resonance, power loops, but Vayan knew better, because the sound had a pattern, a rhythm. And then words. The observatory floated just above the moss-covered moon, tethered by silver umbilicals and steady gravity locks. Its outer skin shimmered with biocoating, adapted to resist the pollen storms now rising from the moon's surface. Vin stood at the acoustic console, adjusting the sensory threads. She didn't look up when the new rival stepped onto the bridge. She heard him first, the soft grind of heavy feet, like boots wrapped in stone. You're early, she said, still tuned into the sound feed. I prefer to see the world before it sees me, the voice replied. It was warm, gravelly, and deep like the earth shifting under snow. She finally turned. He was taller than she expected, gray, mineral-like skin laced with crystalline veins that pulsed slowly. Under his outer layer, a breathing mask rested loosely over his jaw, but he didn't wear it. He had the bearing of someone polite enough not to impose, but firm enough to stay anyway. Kenneth Thalia, he said, offering a short bow. I was assigned as geological liaison. They say the moon is blooming. I'm here to see what it's becoming. Vayan, she answered, then gestured to the humming console. And it's not just blooming, it's speaking. The moon had changed since the Cri incident. They all knew the story how a single botanist triggered a cascade by touching one of the old moss stones, how something ancient woke up and mistook her for a mother. Since then, the surface had reshaped itself. Tower vines grew taller than observatory towers. Root systems pulsed with light. And now, the song.vin played Ken the latest recordings. The sound came through like whispering wind over chimes, fractured, uncertain. Not a language, not yet, but something purposeful. You think it's intelligent? Ken asked, arms crossed. Vian's eyes flicked toward the console. It's remembering. Ken was quiet for a moment. So it's not just evolving, it's reaching back. She nodded, and it's trying to talk. Problem is it doesn't know how. Their first joint expedition was to the southern Bloomfield Dam, area where the moss had grown dense, and the stone circles vibrated every night at the same hour. Ken wore layered plating over his joints, the kind that flexed with his movement, but could withstand a rock slide. Vian wore little more than a dark thermal wrap, and her sensory recorder clipped to her collar. The air was breathable, but thick with spores that stuck to skin like glitter. Ken's stone gray arms were soon dusted in green. Does it always do this? He asked, brushing at his shoulders. Only when it likes you. So the moon flirts now? If it does, it has better taste than most, she said, not smiling, but her voice tilted toward it. They reached the center of the Bloomfield. The stone ring thrummed beneath their feet. Vian knelt and pressed her ear to the moss. Ken watched, then crouched beside her. He touched the stone, and the song changed. The shift was immediate. Before, the tones were random notes strung like wildflowers. But now, they circled a center. They harmonized. Vian's jaw clenched as she felt her ears buzz. You did something, she said. I just touched it. No. It recognized you. The stone pulsed beneath them. Ken stood, frowning. I'm not part of this. My people, Vian interrupted. What's your species' planetary origin? Ken blinked. Thalia Prime. Subcrust dwelling. We were born in the fault lines of a shattered moon. Vian stared at the moss. Maybe it's not recognizing you. Maybe it remembers you. They returned to the observatory. Vian pored over the new acoustic files. Ken stood nearby, watching the window where the moon's surface seemed to glow softly. It's not just communicating anymore, she said. It's responding emotionally. How can you tell? She pointed at a waveform. The spike happened when you stepped back. This dip when you touched it again. It's not language, it's longing. Ken moved slowly toward the console. And if it's longing, then what does it want? The screen flickered. A word appeared in glyphs neither of them recognized. Curling. Floral strokes. Vian's recorder translated it phonetically. Come home. The next week passed in restless cycles. Vian slept in intervals, always waking with echoes of songs she didn't remember dreaming. Ken spent more time in the Bloomfields, letting the stones pulse under his feet. The moon liked him, responded to him. But Vian was the one it whispered to in the dark. You're starting to take this personally, Ken said one night, handing her a nutrient pack. Maybe it is personal, she replied. What if this thing isn't just sentient, but wounded? What if it wants what it once had? A mother, she nodded, or something close enough. Ken leaned back against the wall. You think it's projecting memories of Ciari? Maybe. Then, what do you think it sees when it looks at you? She didn't answer. That night, Vian dreamt of moss. Not dead matter but moss that breathed and pulsed. It wrapped around her fingers like silk and pulled her into a garden filled with music. Not human, not alien, but aching with emotion. At the center of the garden stood a massive stone, and beside it Ken. He was younger, bare of armor, laughing as the moss reached up to cradle him. When she woke, her palms were damp, her chest heavy. And her recorder had logged an acoustic burst at 3:14 a.m. A soft phrase, repeating double quotes. Remember, remember, remember. The observatory council finally called. They wanted to know if the moon was safe to study or if it should be quarantined. Vian didn't answer. Ken stood beside her in the calm room. If they shut this down, they won't, she said, though she sounded less certain than she meant to. The council's voice came through again. Does the structure pose a risk? Vian stared at the screen. Only if we stop listening. On their last day together, they descended into the Bloomfield. Again. Vin walked ahead this time. The moss parted like water. The stone circles hummed. You've changed, Ken said. She didn't turn. How? You used to listen for answers. Now you listen for feeling. She turned toward him then. And you used to keep your distance. He stepped closer. Some things are worth getting close to. The moss shimmered. The stones pulsed. The moon sighed. And in the stillness, Vin reached out not to the stone, but to Ken. His skin was cool, vibrating faintly with inner light. They touched. And the bloom erupted. Petals unfurled from the ground. Light danced between their feet. The air filled with music, not just tones, but laughter, memories. Morning. And from the heart of the stone ring, a voice spoke. Not Vin's, not Ken's, not Ciari's, but something that remembered all three. Thank you for coming home. As the petals fell around them, Vin looked up. The moon no longer felt like an object. It felt like a child who had finally learned how to say love. And she wasn't afraid of it anymore. Miran never planned to return to the moon. Not after what happened with the Ciari bloom. Not after the spire rose and the moss took over half the southern domes. She'd left all that behind, packed her memories into quiet boxes and shipped them off with the last cargo hauler back to the Belt Colonies. But then she received the message. Encrypted. Incomplete. 3 words glitched in between static and silence. Come remember me. And Miran knew it wasn't from a person. It was from the moon. She arrived on a freighter no one cared to log, bypassed a dozen silent satellites, and dropped into the overgrown landing pad outside Dome 7. It was quiet. Not dead, just breathing differently. Like the moon was waiting. She stepped out in a patchy orange suit, her boots sinking slightly into moss that glowed a soft violet under her weight. Nothing attacked her. No vines tried to drag her underground. Instead, the petals bloomed at her feet. Welcoming. That's not creepy at all, she muttered. But she didn't turn back. Inside the dome, someone was already there. Not human. He stood beside one of the moss-covered consoles, his form long and serpentine, shoulders narrow, with skin like tarnished copper folded over silver veins. No armor, no weapons, just long hands held open, as if in peace. His eyes glowed like twin moons. You came, he said. Miran paused. You sent the message. He shook his head slowly. No, the moon did. She frowned. How did it know me? He moved closer. His voice was low and soft, like water over metal. You left something behind. His name was Iash. He didn't come from any world Miran knew. He claimed he had been part of the moon's root system network for decades, listening and dreaming, waiting for someone to answer the call. And Ciari, she asked. What happened to her? She stayed too long, Iash said gently. She forgot where she ended and the moon began. Miran swallowed. So it consumed her. No, he said. It loved her. And when she left, it mourned. Miran sat slowly. The moss shifted beneath her, forming a soft chair. I didn't come here to be mourned, she whispered. No, said Iash, kneeling beside her. You came to remember. The memories were not hers, but they felt like hers. The moon began showing them in fragments through dreams, through light-filtered projections on the walls, through the humming of the moss underfoot. A childlike mind waking in the dark. A caretaker with winged arms teaching it how to feel wind. A technician showing it the shape of laughter. A geologist who stayed long enough to let it speak. It's a collector, Iash said, touching the moss, of memory, of meaning, of love when it finds it. Miran stared into the petals that had opened for her. And it found me. You touched it, he said. Once, years ago, a single moment, and it never forgot. She didn't remember. That moment clearly. A broken radio, a long day of repairs, and a strange stone that vibrated when she leaned on it. A whisper, nothing more. But the moon had remembered. And now, it wanted to speak to her again. Miran and Iash walked the Bloomfields. In silence. Where once towers had been, now grew soft canopies of translucent leaves that caught starlight like nets. The structures had melted into the garden. The air was thick with warmth, not heat, but comfort, like memory made physical. This place feels like a dream, Miran murmured. Iash nodded. The moon dreams through you. They stopped at the edge of a glowing pond. It shimmered with moving light, not water, but memory. Yash knelt beside it. It wants to show you something. Miran hesitated, then touched the surface. A vision unfolded. She saw herself younger, less tired, standing in the maintenance ring, laughing with someone she didn't recognize, tall, winged. Soft voice. Not Yosh. Not human. The moss spiraled around their feet. The stone pulsed softly behind them. Miran leaned in. The memory shifted. The figure turned toward her and said, "When the petals end, you'll remember why you stayed." Then the vision dissolved. Miran's hands were shaking. "Who was that?" she asked. Yash's expression was unreadable. "Someone the moon loved through you." The next day, Miran woke to find Yash gone. Instead, the moss had formed a trail. She followed it through twisting passages that hadn't existed the day before, under archways made of memory vines, and into a chamber pulsing with light. The spire stood there, taller than before, the same one Ciari had touched. Miran stepped toward it. And it whispered, "You are not her." Miran froze. "But you were with her, and you stayed, even when others fled." The spire pulsed, a heartbeat. "You remembered the silence. You honored it. Now we offer you a gift." The petals around the spire folded outward. Inside lay Yosh. Asleep. No transforming. His body shimmered with moss light, his skin glowing from within. Miran gasped. "What did you do to him?" "He chose." He remembered. "He stayed." Yash opened his eyes. They were brighter than before. And when he reached for her, his voice was stronger. "You came back." They stood together, hand in hand, as the chamber bloomed around them. Miran didn't know what the moon was becoming. A garden. A mind. A cathedral of memories. But she knew that she wasn't afraid anymore. She knew she wasn't alone. And as Yash smiled at her and pressed her hand against his chest, where something warm and living beat beneath moss-covered skin, she understood what the moon had wanted all along. Not a mother. Not a god. Just someone to stay. Just someone to remember. No one told Yen that the stars could lie. But now, floating above the memory moon in a weathered relay ship named Small History, she was beginning to suspect they'd been lying all along. "There's no trace," she said, squinting at the glowing surface through the forward glass. "No towers, no moss bloom, no spire." Next to her, Relin leaned forward, his dark braid floating slightly in zero-G. "Doesn't mean it's gone. Just means it doesn't want to be seen." "Yeah, well." Yen flicked a switch, switching to thermals. It could at least be polite about it. They had come looking for a signal. Not just any signal, an echo from something called the Bloom Protocol. A wideband message that had burst across the quiet networks a few nights ago. No origin, no destination. Just a simple phrase. "Come listen." Yen had wanted to ignore it, but Relin had stared too long at the blinking beacon and said, "What if it's someone we left behind?" The moon didn't greet them, didn't hum, didn't bloom, didn't unfold like the stories said. Instead, it waited. They landed in what should have been the central observatory, now buried in soft gray dust. Like memory ground down into ash, the landing pad groaned under their boots. No signs of life. Yen muttered. Raylen pointed. "What about that?" Half buried in the dust was a single stone unmarked, but warm to the touch. It vibrated faintly under Yen's glove, like a heartbeat. She whispered. They began setting up relay amplifiers. Yen worked in silence, threading cables between collapsed moss bulbs and long dead vines. The place felt hollow. But Relin kept humming to himself, not nervously, thoughtfully. "You think this place is listening?" he asked, eyes scanning the horizon. "If it is," Yen said, "it's not saying much. Maybe it's waiting." "For what?" Relin looked over at her. "For someone to apologize." Yen blinked. "For what?" "Forgetting it." They didn't talk much after that. Until night. Moon night wasn't like space night. Something in the spores blocked certain wavelengths, bent the stars around the edge of perception. They made camp under a bent bloom ring. And that's when the voices started. Faint, just beneath hearing. Like laughter carried on wind that didn't blow. Yen sat up in her sleep roll. Relin was already awake. "You hear that?" she whispered. He nodded slowly. "It knows we're here now." The voice didn't speak words. It played back pieces. Echoes of other people, other lives. A whisper from someone named Vayan. A laugh from someone called Ciari. A quiet "you came back" spoken with such love that Yen's chest hurt. "It's remembering for them," she said. Relin stared into the moss, which now faintly glowed under their feet. "Or it's remembering us. We've never been here. Not physically." Relin took off one glove and reached toward the ground. The moss curled gently round his fingers. The next morning, something stood outside the camp. Not a person, a structure grown overnight. A spiral of living stone, curled in on itself like a sleeping animal. Yen approached slowly. The moss receded under her boots. At the center of the spiral, a pool of mirrored light waited. "Don't touch it," she said instinctively. But Relin stepped beside her, eyes wide. "Why not?" "Because someone did, and the moon thought she was its mother. Maybe it still does," he said. "Maybe that's the problem." But Relin kneeled anyway. He didn't touch the light. He spoke to it. "We forgot you. We left you. We stopped listening. But we're here now." The moss quivered. The pool responded. A voice echoed from within. Soft and sad. "You changed. You were mine, and now you are lost." Yen shivered. "What is this place?" she asked. Relin looked up, a grief still blooming. The days passed differently. Time twisted gently under the influence of the moon's memory web. Some hours stretched. Others vanished. But Yen and Relin stayed. And slowly, the moon unfolded. The moss began to open in layers, revealing preserved memories like petals holding light. One showed a woman laughing under starlight. Another showed two figures cradling each other beside the spire. Another was just a hand pressed to stone, waiting. Yen sat by the recordings, cataloging them in silence. But it wasn't until she heard her own voice faint, years old, that she froze. "What is this?" she whispered. Relin was beside her instantly. On the moss, the echo of her voice repeated, "Don't let them close it down. This place remembers everything." "I never said that." "Not here," Relin agreed. "So how?" The moon responded. "You were part of the ones who forgot. But not always. They found the spire 3 days later. It hadn't moved, but it had grown. Spirals etched across its surface now told stories written in a language neither of them knew, but somehow understood. One story showed a woman cradling light. Another, a figure like Relin reaching for her. Another still showed two shapes curled together as the moon bloomed around them. "It's showing us what it wanted," Relin said. Yen didn't speak. Her fingers brushed a groove in the spire, and her chest filled with something like longing. That night, the moon spoke again. Not as echo, but as itself. "Why did you leave me?" Yen sat upright. Her eyes burned. "We didn't know how to stay. You knew how to listen. We forgot." "Then why return?" Relin answered for her. "To remember, and to make it right." The moon was quiet. "Then, will you stay this time?" Yen hesitated. "We can't stay forever. But you can love me." Yen's single quotes S voice broke. "I think we already do." The moss wrapped the observatory in new vines. Petals opened around the landing gear. The relay systems began to hum, not with old signals, but new ones. Memories being sent outward, not cries for help, but invitations. Relin took Yen's hand. "This is what we're meant to do," he said. "Stay here forever." "No," he said. "Plant something new, and leave the memory for others." Yen watched the spire, pulse. And for the first time, she understood. This wasn't a warning. It was an archive of love, a place built from those who had touched it, and stayed long enough to leave a part of themselves behind. She recorded one last message. "This place remembers, and it forgives. If you're lost, come here. If you loved and lost, come here." The moon knows what that feels like. She sent it. Then stepped away from the console. Relin waited at the threshold of the spiral, hand outstretched. "You ready?" Yen smiled softly. "I think it's ready for us now." They stepped into the bloom together, and the petals closed gently behind them. Davi was never supposed to receive the message. He wasn't on any list. He wasn't a scientist, or a dreamer, or even someone who listened closely to stars. He was a waste cycle worker on a third-tier transport, patching leaking coolant systems, and guiding salvage arms through asteroid fields. He wasn't important, but when the signal reached him, crackling through a rusted comm that no one else on the crew used, something in him stopped. The voice said, "If you hear me, bloom." And that was enough. He took a pod on shore leave, told no one where he was going. He didn't need directions. The signal pulled at his chest like a thread woven through gravity itself. The moon appeared in the corner of his pod's scratched viewport.gray.quiet.ordinary. But as he came closer, it opened. Not all at once. Just a single petal. Just enough to let him through. The landing was soft. To soft. He stepped out into something like mist, but sweeter, warmer. The moss hadn't grown here the way it had in the stories. It pulsed gently, barely visible, like a memory that hadn't fully returned yet. "Hello," Davi called, uncertain. There was no reply. Only warmth, only breath. He walked for hours. The old observatories were gone, sunken under layers of pale flowers. The spires he'd read about were distant silhouettes, curved like frozen waves on a silent sea. But then he saw something new. A light, a campfire. She sat alone, humming. Her skin was sun-darkened, her hands marked by pollen. She wore no suit, no gloves, no mask, just moss-threaded cloth and a necklace made of spire shards. "You're late," she said gently, without turning. Davi blinked. "You were expecting me, not me," she said, turning at last. The moon. Her name was Solon, and she had lived there for years. "I came because of the message," Davi said. They were sitting by the fire now. It wasn't fire, not really, just glowing spores dancing in the air like embers. Solon tilted her head. "Which one?" "The one that said, 'If you hear me, bloom.'" She smiled. "That was mine. She'd arrived seasons ago, long after the Bloomfields quieted. She didn't come to study. She came to mourn. I lost someone," she said. "I thought the moon might remember him. I didn't expect it to remember me." Davi said nothing. Solen reached forward and touched his wrist. "It doesn't send that message often. Not unless it's ready." "Ready for what?" Davi asked. "For a new story." They walked through the bloom paths together. Solen showed him the petals that sang when touched, the stones that pulsed in time with heartbeat, the chamber where echoes of laughter never faded. "This place doesn't want gods," she told him, "or masters, or protectors." "Then what?" "Companions," she said softly. "Listeners, lovers." "Lovers? Not the way you think," she said, smiling. "But yes, the moon blooms for those who care." That night, he dreamed of moss. Not choking, not crawling, but lifting him gently like wind under wings. He saw Solon, younger, laughing in the light of a spire. He saw himself, not as he was, but as he could be, softer, rooted, open. He woke with tears in his eyes. "It remembered you," she said quietly from beside him. "Already." Days passed, or maybe not days. Time bent in strange ways on the moon. He and Solon built a canopy near the spiral field, not to live in but to return to mark their place. And slowly, the bloom began again. Flowers opened where they walked. Music returned. And sometimes, late at night, Davi would hear echoes in his bones. Not words. Just warmth. They made love in the moss. It wasn't planned. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, like rain. He touched her hand and she leaned into his chest, and the petals curled up around them like a cocoon. No voices. No memory echoes. Just breath and heartbeat. Just now. And when they woke, the spire nearest their canopy had begun to hum. "The moon loves stories," Solon said the next morning, "but only the kind that change." Davi looked at her. "How do we change?" She took his face in her hands. "By choosing not to leave." They sent no messages. They made no announcements. They didn't need to. The moon bloomed brighter now. Other signals were coming in. Others would follow. But Davi knew some stories didn't need an audience. Some stories just needed to be felt. Lived. Loved. The last scene, if there was one, was simple. To figures resting against each other beneath a canopy of memory. Petals overhead. Moss beneath. And a moon at peace. Finally loved enough to stop longing. The bloom never ended, but it didn't need to, not anymore.